Yeah. Turn off the. Right. There was an interesting experiment there, I think. YouTube's telling me now managing moderators can support your channel in even more ways. Hmm. Okay, well, anyway, we're going to have to get more moderators, I think, because of bad words, probably. Let me just. This is. I was basically just listening to myself there on YouTube just to see if this mic was working. That's not supposed to be the camera angle or anything. That's just the way it is at the moment. It's not performance art. No. So it's just I got a bit fed up with my whole setup, so I want to make it more comfortable for myself with a better camera, having it like kind of closer to me. And well, this is a travesty already. So as you can see, it's very difficult to fix it onto this laptop I've got, but this is a terrible angle. Ashton, hello, Ashton. Yes, as you can see, I'm putting my furious anger into something productive here and just doing a video testing out these relatively, budget priced Sennheiser headphones, but they've got a mic on them, and I've never really used one with a mic on, and I think it's the way forward for me. These are actually not my headphones. I've got them for a present for somebody, but I just want to test them, see if it'll work in this sort of arena. It is just a live stream, Phantom Cooper. If you want to see it as performance art, though, that's fine. I'm not going to stop you doing that, should I say. You're welcome to come in as a mod, Gary. I don't really think, you could do it. Even Ashton, who's a newcomer, who I've held to impossible high standards, thinking that she was going to take over the whole thing as a prominent female on the show, and I can only apologise for my ridiculous demands at times. I always think that if anyone who comes in who's not a guy, basically, will be able to salvage coffee time from the wreckage of what it is at the moment. And I'm only part joking, but it's not a realistic thing to start making demands of somebody online like that on my part. Hello, Facebook user. I can't remember which. Trust me, Millie, there is wreckage. Not from your perspective, but for me, it's inevitable anyway. To deny it is to just avoid it. The reality is very clear. Um, Almost as good as the sound, as Gary says. I think, doing that interview with Dustin the other day on Sunday, if anything, highlights more and more how far we've gone away from that Twin Peaks obsession and all of that kind of thing. So, that's just the natural progression. And to try and, turn it into something related to, let's talk about Twin Peaks again, just for the sake of it. This is just definitely not going to go that way, because it just doesn't interest me in the slightest at this point. And I spent so long doing videos with Cameron talking about Twin Peaks that really, it's a case of been there, done that now. I don't want to just keep going back down that purely for the sake of some imagined audience or something, which pretty much don't exist anyway. And I think most Twin Peaks fans are reasonably well adjusted to enough to just move on and take interest in other things rather than obsessively focus on something, as if it was the best thing since sliced bread, really. Yeah, it would be a good idea, Ashton, I think, with someone like you, because you are particularly, I would say, sensible. I think Dustin was a good interview, absolutely. That doesn't mean that I quite follow his way of thinking about things, but I think that's the beauty of doing videos, in that you can have a whole host of different opinions. It doesn't mean that I necessarily share the same opinion. Otherwise, it's just a case of people nodding dogs, all in agreement with each other. And I think he has his own quite specific take on things, further explained in the Cameron interview, perhaps to some extent, although I think that was a bit more musical based, but worth checking out. Dustin actually sent to me another very well produced interview he did called, let me just get it up on here. Dustin Carpenter is his name. He's the guy, obviously, from Wisteria Lodge. He was on a podcast which is called Creamed Corn and the Universe on creamedcornandtheuniverse.podbean.com. They did a whole 55 minutes of an episode going back to last July, episode 10, Judy featuring Dustin of Wisteria Lodge. So if you want to hear more from Dustin, then I'll just send the link here, but I'll put it on the main link underneath the video as well. So it's come up there as different sort of James, we should start a book club whilst we wait for Twin Peaks season 4. I vote for reading Lord of the Rings or American Psycho. Right, well, put some foam underneath this and maybe make it stay still. The Lord of the Rings is not something I've ever tried reading. I would probably have no problem with doing that if Voltaire wanted to read it to us all. I think in terms of Voltaire, and he's often being compared to the main character in American Psycho, Patrick Bateman. I think that would be more suited for starters. So I'll put that one to him. And I'm not sure about just reading the entire book. It would be better perhaps to read out chapters or excerpts from the book, because I know that each chapter in it is probably not majorly long, and then compare it to the film and make some discussion based on that. Well, I mean, I think that's pretty much what I do now, Millie, really. It's just that at the moment, and I don't know whether it could be just to do with there's the Twin Peaks Day coming up and certain things happening around that, like Wisteria Lodge, Dustin promoting his production. He is, after all, the producer of the music. And if you listen to the entire album and everything about it, really, and there's the videos he's already got out, then you'll probably understand just how good he is at that. I'm not going to just sort of sit and say, "Oh, it's the best thing since ever." It's got a lot of singing from the main singer in the band, which certainly is suited to certain songs in it and is very good. But for sometimes I think bringing in different vocalists and things like that can be a good idea sometimes. So, and having female and male vocals, perhaps this kind of thing. So, even when you look at, like, say, old Julie Cruz albums, it can be a case where you think, this could be changed around, and we could bring in different vocals here. Sometimes it seems much of a muchness, sometimes, especially I would say with her second album that she did with Lynch and Badalamenti, The Voice of Love. So Twin Peaks still has a lot of discussion that can be had, but I feel like it's better done sparingly when new ideas or concepts are created, instead of constantly bantering about who Judy is. Well, I don't really know how far we would even take that. It could be something that Mandela Man, for instance, could go with, but you see, if it's just on the spur of the moment, then really, what do people have to add? It's sort of it's the sort of thing that you need to plan, and spend, say, a couple of weeks coming up with some ideas. Then you take it into that area, rather than it just be, shooting the shit as such. I mean, I think Josh did a lot of shooting of the shit when he was on, and that is something that I, especially whilst drinking, which I frown upon as I'm a very much a certified, sophisticated moralist, really. I've always been like that, really, from a very young age. And I went through a phase where I thought that drinking was sort of like the cure for cancer and the best thing known to man, in that it, stops you being so, like, trapped in your thoughts a little bit and inhibited. But the thing is, it goes full circle, and then you end up almost as worse than you were back at square one, especially if you make yourself ill doing it. So that could be who Judy is. In terms of, yeah, in terms of recently, for instance, with this Wisteria Lodge band, the Twin Peaks Days thing happening in Snoqualmie. Obviously, it's not a massive event, perhaps, or not that they were ever that massive, but not as big as the Twin Peaks Festival that came before. It's more of a stopgap type thing, but and due to the time of year just not being one when people would be doing this kind of thing on their holidays or something like this. Um, but you know, it's going to be more for the hardcore. If you're going to live hardcore, then you've got to, you know, be hardcore or whatever the lyrics in School of Rock are, and so you get the hardcore going to the Twin Peaks Days thing. Um, just not with any hardcore behaviour, hopefully, because that then they could get banned or something. Particularly if they're involved in not telephone, but toilet policing, which is one thing mentioned that you shouldn't be something, you know, don't get involved or ensconced in that. I don't know what it means, but it's like, you know, if you've got like, say, lots of men going in there all dressed as women, they can go into the women's toilets. And I mean, I certainly wouldn't police that. I would actually encourage it so that there were all men in the women's toilets and there was no room for the women, basically. And I'd say, you know, you women go and piss behind the double R or something, just to keep it classy. As a sophisticated moralist, you're going down for Voltaire's read along. TMI. I don't know if you want to be going down for Voltaire, but I mean, you know, fair enough. Yeah, I mean, Voltaire does live his life like Bateman because he says that he's not got any books or DVDs, especially in his apartment. And to me, that seems just basically like, you know, he's living so frugally in a sense that he has no possessions or anything. A bit like the character played by Robert De Niro in Heat, where if you feel the heat just coming down the street or on the corner of the street, or you know, round the back of some toilets where you're in the toilet, if the heat, you know, is on you, and someone's policing that toilet, for instance, like the Al Pacino character in Heat, then you can kind of get out of there as fast as possible. And that's what I think of as Voltaire as being like that. He's, you know, it's very obvious that he's involved in dodgy, dubious, you know, affairs, and he wants to get out of that situation as fast as possible without thinking, you know, I've got the boxed set of Twin Peaks on VHS or Sandra Bullock's collection of DVD films, you know, to kind of put in a rucksack or anything. He just doesn't care. He just thinks, I only need a toothbrush and a credit card, and I'm out of there. And they, you know, they won't get my ass, even if they're like the fastest FBI or cops or whatever. I'm faster. No, I do think that Phantom Cooper's right, that Voltaire is just about ready to snap at any point. He could actually. I think with the karate and everything, which he's skilled in, from what I know, and this is part of why he liked the series Cobra Kai. You know, he would be able to drop kick just anybody if the heat was on his tail, basically, on the streets of LA. It's a case of, you know, to live or die in LA for him. Hello there to Isabella Mars. I'm very pleased to have you here again, and also a bit surprised because I thought you were based in London. So, like me, it's like the middle of the night, but I've stayed up a bit of late today. So, NGL, NGL, what's that mean, Phantom Cooper? I agree on Josh's analysis on Wisteria Lodge. Uh, Well, I don't think that. I think that it's somebody people can come across different ways when they're on an interview, and I sort of give him the thumbs up or two thumbs up even, or even more thumbs up really, if just because he's making an effort, to talk on a video and express himself fully, not just sort of just he wanted to really bring it to me, and I appreciate that. Not just sort of start talking about fixing a mic to a drum or something like this, which I'm not sure how much that would be up my alleyway. Apparently, the legend of the Rent is way hardcore. I know this actually from that is the lyric from School of Rock, and I think that lyric still stands up, to be honest, as a comment on modern society where rents have gone way too high, and it's just ridiculous, frankly. So something that I think people should think about that lyric and also use it as a way of protesting. I can see Voltaire having plain white walls and no posters or not posters, maybe a sofa and a TV, maybe a bed and a laptop. Yeah, he has a TV. I can tell that's for sure. Not gonna lie, thank you very much. A sculpture of Beelzebub in the bathroom. Oh my god, that's scary just to even think about it. I'm really shitting myself now. Yeah, I mean, Isabella, you are involved in ballet shoes in part, and also what kind of is like fetish shoe wear, and I can only say I'm impressed. But people like yourself and other people who are now in the chat, what I've noticed is that lately on the it's Damn Good Coffee Time or Twin Peaks Coffee Time, whichever I call it, the group on Facebook has got a lot of people all of a sudden signing up, liking the page and joining and posting somewhat. And that seems all of a sudden just like a flurry of this. And for a long time, it was very quiet. No one joining up, occasionally, sometimes, but not in this number for a long, long time now. So it just seems all of a sudden there's this sort of a fairly sudden interest back to the world of Twin Peaks somehow. But I do think that that is something that can happen just like that. So, yeah, and I'm not saying all that as some kind of just trying to make a joke of it. I'm just saying it as an honest observation of that page. And I don't think, like, obviously one page that I started and all this kind of thing indicates necessarily fandom for Twin Peaks as a whole, but it's definitely interesting why it doesn't seem any clear reason why it's happening. So, and I can't see how it's connected purely to just the Wisteria Lodge posting and things like that, but I think that's definitely helped. So thumbs up to them. Yeah, he's got a phone, but it's like a 90s mobile phone, quite a big one, flip screen. You flip it out or something like that. He has to plug it in about every hour now because the battery's so, or basically only use it plugged in, really. Right, yeah. Since Cameron mentioned it on Twin Peaks Worldwide today, but he didn't mention that the film actually occurs initially on the disappearance and the mystery and everything that percolates throughout it starts on Valentine's Day, which perhaps gives it some kind of mystical aspect, aura to the entire proceedings. Never mind, obviously, just the way it's filmed and the brilliant performances and music. It's probably, if you look into different myths associated with Valentine's Day, it's there's sort of certain, as I said, mystical aspects associated with that. But basically, the film is often associated, is seen as being a classic of its time, from Peter Weir, the director. But in the film, they have a feast as such, which St. Valentine's Day is known as the Feast of St. Valentine. And in it, they have, like, they take all of their picnic and everything. This girls' school, rather uptight, sort of repressive atmosphere, where they're literally all wearing corsets and that kind of stuff. Victorian times, going out into the Australian outback. So there's that contradiction where, yeah, I don't really know a lot about Valentine's Day, but in it they have basically there's a cake, and there's a big scene of them all cheering, and then they cut the cake right in half, like very prominently. It's a prominent shot with the knife going right across it. Which, as soon as basically I saw the Wrapped in Plastic fanzine magazine, which has always been very famous within Twin Peaks world, doing a sort of an article all about Picnic at Hanging Rock and drawing all of these parallels down to just the different characters, which is, you can, it's definitely something there. I mean, when I thought of Half Heart, that's not just the song, but I mean the shot of the heart, which they break in half, and, Laura's got half of it. And yeah, it's taken by Dr. Jacoby, but it's buried by Donna and James. And obviously, St. Valentine was a martyr. If you look at some of the old pictures to do with Valentine's Day and things like this, they're very similar to the sort of picture you had in Fire Walk with Me, with the angel feeding the children and all of that kind of thing, which people have tried to find, but it would be something that was done for a card or some kind of greetings card, maybe for Children's Day or something like this. And it would have probably had an anonymous artist, so it's sort of a bit difficult to find. So obviously, the whole sort of usage of Valentine's Day. Yeah, it's not something that I know a lot about, but if you look at the Wikipedia, there's a J.C. Cooper, of all names, writing in the Dictionary of Christianity that a priest of Rome was imprisoned for succoring persecuted Christians. Sorry, that's St. Valentine. So, but this kind of idea, obviously, it's all very removed from the, but it probably has more of a ancient origin as well. It's obviously associated with spring and this time of the year and all that kind of thing. And I think the fact that that is used in Twin Peaks is not completely random. It's obviously just associated with the fact that it's February the 24th, which is 10 days later, from Valentine's Day, when that's actually when Laura Palmer's body is discovered. No, she's actually killed in the night of February the 24th, I think. Blimey, well, courtly love and all this kind of romanticized vision of love is something very much associated really with Twin Peaks, actually, when you think about it. So I think that was one of the big appeals of the show when it began, certainly. The combination of a sort of detective soap opera combined with a romantic soap opera aspect, which I think I'm not sure, I don't know about this, but it's something that might be more of something that was on American TV in the past, like, or even now, I don't know, Days of Our Lives and things like that. I think they may have had a romantic aspect to them, but Twin Peaks very much sort of featured that aspect of things, like with Donna and James, and then James reminiscing obviously about Laura. Cooper's loss in that sense. Josie and Truman. Well, I mean, it obviously reached its crescendo with James and Evelyn. Yeah, all these aspects of it. Then with the people like obviously Big Ed and Norma, and then the Nadine aspect was some things both tragic and comical, and all of these facets of Twin Peaks were pretty much turned on their head in terms of the return and this idea of it was very much a case for the original show that even though Laura Palmer was dead, she lived within the lives of all of these people. Basically, the days in our lives of Laura Palmer in Twin Peaks, and I think many people find that very easy to identify with. Whereas the return was more about the idea that there's this residue of all of that and the trauma, and then it should kind of just dives into the negative side of all of that, sort of epitomized in the bomb explosion, the idea of destruction. And even from destruction, obviously, there's a creative force, in a sense, suggested through the way in which Bob is enabled to come into our world through that destructive force. So I think it's like there was more of a creative force in the original show, and then that's inverted in some sense, more of a romantic creative force, whereas in the return it's more of a sort of a destructive, cynical force at times, which is it's almost that idea of you have to destroy something to be creative to some extent, which is true, I think, in some senses, but not entirely. It's not like it's an absolute necessity. It's just one facet of thing, and I think Lynch and Frost and both of them really love diving into the dark side of things, and that's very much that's the sort of the skill of the return for me, diving into that without any real care for whether this is going to be particularly palatable to other people, maybe. I've lost track of the chat, I think. I do stream on Facebook, Isabella. I was this is on Facebook now, on coming, but it's on the Twin Peaks Coffee Time page. So if you're not on there, you have to be signed up to see it, or just like the page. So please reach out to me on Facebook or on that page, and then we'll You know, we could maybe talk on Facebook or something. It's a good question, Ashton. Thank you very much. Hey, James and everyone, which character from Twin Peaks is most relatable to you? Um, to be realistic and to be honest about it, I think probably for me, I could identify with a character like Sam Stanley, who's sort of witnessing things but doesn't really understand, you know, what's going off essentially, or how to interpret them. And he's, instead of being able to understand the code of the Blue Rose and things like what's going off at the trailer park and with Teresa Banks, you know, he's quite unawares of just the simple ways of relating to these people within the um, Haps Diner, you know. So he's sort of noticing things which seem to be, which could seem to be relevant, but I don't necessarily think that they are. It's just that he has a certain way of going about things. But I think with Cooper, he realizes that Sam is only going to make the investigation of what's happening with Laura Palmer, you know, make it into even more of a prolonged experience, perhaps. And I think there's an aspect of Cooper where he wants to take charge of it. And he probably fears that maybe Sam would come in and muddle that up somewhat or confuse matters. Whereas with Albert, he's almost um, he's possibly obstructive at the first instance, but he after a while he sort of sinks into the this, almost like Twin Peaks has this power over him to introduce him, you know, to this idea of love and affection for people. Whereas when he first comes there into the town, he's very just doesn't seem to be particularly interested, obviously, in being, you know, pleasant to people, basically, mollycoddling anyone or anything like that. Certainly, he's very abrupt. But it seems to change him just being in Twin Peaks, and maybe Cooper's influence, just being around the people in the sheriff's station and being around Sheriff Truman, clearly because he declares his love for him. So, you know, that's surely a great thing, really. I can only imagine that many people would feel that could have been a great reunion between Sheriff Truman and Albert in you know, this imaginary season 3 or whatever. You know, I think so. But anyway, Ashton says mine is Agent Dale Cooper, despite me being a woman. To be honest, he's the most relatable to me than any character in film and television. Yeah, he's. I think all of us identify with Cooper to some extent in an idealized way. Like I remember when the show, you know, began, and that whole time, I think just the massive success of Twin Peaks very initially. I mean, which it really was. You know, people need to remember just how successful it was. Um, you know, in this country, we had on the main Radio Times TV Guide for us, which was, a pretty well thought of magazine. It had Sherilyn Fenn on the cover, as opposed to, say, having Carl McLachlan on the cover for the premiere of Twin Peaks. And that in itself shows partly how the show was promoted, but Cooper was a massive draw in terms of his combination of sort of being strong-minded and very quite assertive of himself. Doesn't he doesn't seem like some kind of pushover, but at the same time he had this whole mystical, magical side to him, perhaps. And so it was that combination of his disciplined side and then the more charismatic and charming side, which he obviously had, where he just seemed to interact with everybody he met within the town with pretty much respectfully and charmingly and all that kind of thing, but without being obviously, cheesy or anything, even though, at the start of the second season, he does say he wishes he could treat people with more care or something like this, when he's shot. But certainly it does seem particularly apparent that he's not doing that. It's obviously just his own insecurity. I have no idea where Mandela Man is, Phantom Cooper. I'm sorry. But if you do identify as Shelley because you're slutty, I mean, personally, I don't think that Shelley is actually slutty as you describe. I just think she's someone who seems to exist more and comes from a background where she was like existing within a useless relationship purely because that's all she could find at that time. And then obviously she was seeing Bobby because she didn't really appreciate Leo at that point. So by the time we see her in The Return, they're split up, Bobby and Shelley, and she's with this pretty much unknown, enigmatic character of Red, who has obviously a sinister side to him. But the fact that she's wearing the red shoes often in her scenes, the red heels, must be part of what's going on, in the sense of they are like a longing for escape, and she wants to be basically like Judy in The Wizard of Oz, going off into this other foreign, not just a foreign land, but a dream world, probably, I suppose. And so, Red has to be associated with that. Not only the fact that he's involved in drugs and things, but the way he's presented in The Return is most certainly dreamlike. So, but it's definitely interesting the way that Shelley's presented in The Return, because it doesn't quite seem like she's really herself somehow. She seems to be almost distracted to the point where, yeah, she's, she is concerned about her daughter and everything. It's a bit hard to quite grasp the idea that Amanda Seyfried is Mädchen und Meek's daughter, though, to be honest. I don't know, it just didn't seem very convincing somehow. So, well, it's like with Cooper, he says, I'm doing this one scene where he's saying, I'm having just come out of some meditation in lieu of sleep. And you just think, like, that's, he's just the most ideal figure who can just, he's not had enough sleep and he can just do a bit of meditation. He's back on the ball. and he's drinking the hot black coffee. The thing with Cooper is he's both slightly an idealized character, but at the same time still has some foot in reality. So it's a great combination. Yeah, I would agree with you on that, Gary. The red confrontation with him and Richard is particularly a very good scene, if that's what you mean by the drug deal, and just that whole thing. It's seems like their attention was really right on the ball with that one. Talking of being on the ball, here's Voltaire. Lynch stole the idea of no sleep and meditation from old Batman comics. Batman only needed 2 hours sleep or slash meditation. Well, I think if it was anyone who wrote that part into the show, it would have been more Mark Frost, I imagine, or someone else. I think that the Buddhist thing with Cooper and his pleas for the people of Tibet and wishes are not exactly coming just from Lynch at all, because transcendental meditation is not linked to Buddhism. So, but they probably put in that aspect of Cooper, partly inspired by Lynch, but it's not just purely a caricature of Lynch. So when you heard of Twin Peaks, you were pumped, Gary said, having seen Blue Velvet and Dune. I mean, for me, when I saw Twin Peaks, I'd never seen Carl McLachlan in anything really, apart from maybe brief clips or something of Blue Velvet. But then I saw Blue Velvet after Twin Peaks, if you can believe that. So I came totally fresh to the wonder of Carl McLachlan, really. And during that time period, I remember renting the Hidden on VHS and enjoying that, because he was FBI in that as well, even though not quite like Cooper at all. He was very much, in 80s mold, 1987 film, where he was wearing a shiny, sort of silvery suit, a bit Miami Vice style, the kind of thing basically that Voltaire still wears to this day, as far as I'm aware. Ashton responds, Gary, Dune and Blue Velvet were amazing. To be honest, the first movie I saw him in was The Flintstones as Cliff Vander Cave. So good. mm. Kyle said he thinks Agent Cooper was an older version of Jeffrey Beaumont in Blue Velvet. Well, yeah, I think there's a lot of truth in that, definitely. A lot of Cooper's background could have been similar to Jeffrey's, probably, but of course we have the book all about Cooper and his My Life, My Tapes. It was more his mother that was ill rather than his father. So, of course, I'd seen The Elephant Man, but Eraserhead was impossible to find on VHS. So I was very familiar with Lynch and remember the hype surrounding the show, says Gary. I actually remember there was a video store in my town, and it was literally called the Video Store, with a squirrel logo, something like that, I believe. and it was quite a reasonably large store, and they had sort of like a area where it was the desk where you went up to get your video or hand it in, and above it there was a bit of sort of a partition above it as well, and I can remember there being a largish Eraserhead poster up there, um, just like, prominently. So we're going back quite a while now to that when that was, and I would have been pretty young, and that just shows the effectiveness of the Eraserhead advertising, with just the shot, of Henry's head, there with the hair sticking up and the look on his face and everything. So you have to, give it to Lynch that he's always been absolutely on the ball when it comes to knowing how to promote a film that might not necessarily get attention so much because it's not quite in the mainstream at all, And this was back in the days when films like that had just this cult cachet on video, etc., far more than you can say in any similar way now. If somebody made a film comparable to that now that embraced sort of surrealism and then just that kind of whole approach, but I'm sure, something completely different. Like if it were just only released now to say streaming or to buy, just uh, coming out on Blu-ray to purchase. I mean, it would never be able to get the same kind of cult appeal in a sort of the fashion, that Eraserhead as a midnight movie. You can't really have a midnight streaming movie that's just somewhere on Netflix or something, and I'm not trying to romanticize anything and say one thing is better than the other, because I think the way in which people now have just massive access to films has immediately made everybody very blasé about films. It's just because it's over 10 years or more since it's gone from just streaming as a sort of something that's coming in, and then now it's just completely widespread over the last decade or more now. And so you can pretty much find any film you want, really, within reason. And back in those days, it's kind of ridiculous to think that I would have been going to the video store in my town to look for something to rent, and I'd be seeing, a video cassette, which was the European extended version of Twin Peaks, the pilot. And they had literally one copy of it in, maybe. And that's how I saw Twin Peaks for the first time. So I think I probably saw it first on TV and then rented it afterwards as well. And then saw the extended, yeah, definitely, like that. No, it's very much, you're describing how things were back then, like in the early 90s and everything. Like I bought a widescreen VHS version of Wild at Heart, and that was somehow, warranted purchase, when to look at it now visually and everything, it would have been something to watch on a 4:3 ratio TV in my case, and then it's basically 1/3 or more of the TV, of the actual screen, and just the quality was obviously not particularly impressive. So people really have it very, very good nowadays for viewing films and things like that. So, or when I say things like that, I mean American football for Volta. So yeah, I think I'll leave it at that now. I've tested my mic enough. Hope it sounds not too bad. So thank you for watching, anybody out there still watching, and I'll wish you all the best for now. Cheerio. Just going to go on off and eat 2 cherry pies now, I think.